When Ava Carter slipped in an alley and watched her lunch explode across the wet pavement, humiliation burned hotter than her scraped palms. She thought her life couldn't get any worse. Late, broke, and exhausted, she never imagined the stranger offering her a hand would be the missing CEO of one of Riverton's biggest tech empires. Sometimes fate crashes into us when we're looking the other way. Ava Carter charged down Jefferson Avenue like her heels were on fire. Her resume was crumpled in one hand, and a paper bag holding a cheap lunch clutched in the other. Sweat clung to her hairline, despite the chilly spring breeze sweeping through Riverton. She glanced at her phone and groaned. 10 minutes until the interview and she was still 4 blocks away. Cutting through the alley was the only way she'd make it. She cursed under her breath, ducked into the narrow passageway and quickened her steps. The ground was littered with damp flyers, old coffee cups and greasy patches that glistened like oil spills. A sour smell of garbage clung to the air, but Ava barely noticed. She was too focused on that tiny possibility of landing a job that could save her from living paycheck to paycheck. Then her heel hit a slick patch of wet paper. Time slowed as she felt her foot slide forward, weight tipping backward. Her bag of lunch sailed into the air, spinning in slow-motion arcs. Rice and chicken burst out of the torn paper bag like confetti. Then she hit the ground. Pain shot up her hip and shoulder. The resume fluttered to the concrete beside her, stained with sauce droplets. Ava winced, eyes burning. She wanted to scream, cry, and curse the universe all at once. But the only sound that came out was a small, strangled laugh. "Perfect," she muttered. A voice echoed from behind a stack of soggy cardboard boxes. "Are you hurt?" Ava blinked, breathless. Slowly, a man stepped into view. His hair was messy, beard untrimmed, clothes stained and wrinkled. He wore a threadbare gray coat and shoes that looked held together with tape. Everything about him screamed homeless. Except his eyes. They were startlingly clear, sharp, as if he was thinking 10 steps ahead of everyone else. Ava tried to get up, but pain made her hiss. The man offered a hand. "Let me help you." His voice was warm, low, almost professional in its calmness. Ava stared at his outstretched hand. A part of her wanted to refuse. She was too proud to accept help, especially from someone who looked like he lived in this alley. But her hip throbbed and she was late. She took his hand. He pulled her up with surprising strength, as if he'd done it 1,000 times before. Ava dusted off her coat, cheeks flushed. She looked around at her destroyed lunch scattered like a failed art project. "Great," she said. "Just great." The man bent and began gathering the rice and chicken into the crumpled paper bag. "You know," he said, "it's just food. Doesn't mean the day's ruined." Ava barked a humorless laugh. "You clearly don't know my day." He held out the paper bag to her, now half filled with bits of rice and sauce. "Here." Ava hesitated, then took it from him. "Thanks, Ethan." He gave a small nod. "Ethan Rhodes." Ava hugged the sad bag of food to her chest. "I'm Ava." She tried to step around him, but a glimpse of red caught her eye. She looked down. A thin trail of blood trickled along the side of Ethan's foot. A tear in his sock revealed an ugly gash, pink and raw. "Wait," she said sharply. "You're bleeding." "It's nothing," he said, shrugging. "I'm used to it." Ava knelt, ignoring the filth of the alley floor. She opened her purse and pulled out tissues, a small bottle of rubbing alcohol and some medical tape. "This will sting." Ethan watched her, curiosity flickering in his eyes. "I've had worse," he said. She dabbed the wound gently. Ethan winced but didn't pull away. He glanced at her with a look Ava couldn't quite place. Surprise, gratitude, maybe something deeper. "Why help me?" he asked quietly. Ava didn't answer right away. She focused on wrapping his foot as neatly as possible. Finally she murmured, "Because I know what it's like, to feel invisible." Ethan held her gaze for a beat. Then a ghost of a smile tugged at his lips. "Between two lives," he murmured. Ava blinked. "What?" He tilted his head, almost as if deciding how much to say. "I'm just, between who I was and who I'll be." Ava wanted to ask more, but her phone buzzed in her pocket. One look at the screen made her heart sink. She was officially late. Ava stood up quickly, brushing dirt from her knees. Listen. I have to go. Ethan nodded, stepping aside. Of course. Ava took a few steps, then turned back. You gonna be okay? Ethan gave a half smile. I always am. Ava hesitated, then hurried toward the street. As she reached the sidewalk, she looked back. Ethan was already fading into the shadows of the alley, leaning against the wall like he belonged there. A twist of something pulled at Ava's chest, guilt, curiosity, maybe both. Then she squared her shoulders and rushed off, her thoughts spinning. She had no idea this man would change everything. But a tiny voice inside her whispered that the story wasn't over. Ava Carter had never expected the alley to become part of her daily routine. But after that morning, she found herself glancing down its narrow length each time she passed by. At first, it was just curiosity. She half expected Ethan to have vanished like a ghost. But every day he was there. Some days sitting on a milk crate, staring into the distance. Other days leaning against the brick wall, quietly observing the world go by. Always calm. Always strangely dignified for someone wearing a worn-out coat. Ava couldn't explain why she started slowing her steps whenever she approached the alley. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was fascination. Or maybe, deep down, she just didn't want to feel alone. One morning she was running late as usual. The sky was pale, painted in strokes of peach and silver. She rushed past the alley and heard a familiar voice. Interview today? Ava stopped, rolled her eyes and turned toward Ethan. He was perched on the edge of a cardboard box, hands tucked into his sleeves. Not today, she called back. Just delivering resumes. Ethan tilted his head. You'll get one soon. The right one. Ava almost laughed. Says the guy living behind a dumpster. Ethan grinned. Sometimes the view back here is clearer than up front. Ava snorted. I'll keep that in mind. She moved to leave, then hesitated. Did your foot heal okay? Ethan wiggled his toes inside his battered shoes. Better than yesterday. Thanks to my private nurse. Ava blushed and waved him off. You're impossible. But she walked away smiling. The next day she brought an extra coffee from a gas station. She approached the alley, holding the cheap paper cup out like an offering. Ethan looked surprised. For me? Ava shrugged. Don't make it weird. It was free with my sandwich. Ethan accepted the coffee, cradling it like a treasure. Steam curled around his fingers as he blew on it. It's the little things, he murmured. What is? Ava asked. That save people. Ava stared at him, taken aback. She wondered who he had been before the beard and the ragged clothes. Are you some philosopher or just insane? Maybe both, Ethan replied. Ava chuckled. Good to know. Each day after that, she found herself stopping more often. Sometimes only for a quick, hey. Sometimes for 5 minutes of conversation that somehow always left her feeling steadier than before. Ethan rarely spoke about himself. But he always noticed details about Ava. Long night? He asked one morning, spotting the shadows under her eyes. Ava grumbled. Late shift at the diner. Tips sucked. Ethan nodded, thoughtful. People notice confidence. Even if you have to fake it. Ava lifted an eyebrow. Is that your strategy for surviving the streets? Ethan's smile faded slightly. For surviving anywhere. The words hung between them for a moment, heavier than the cool morning air. Then one morning, winter decided to slam into Riverton like a door thrown shut. Snow drifted in the corners of the streets. The wind knifed through Ava's thin coat as she hurried toward the alley. Halfway down the block she stopped. Ethan was there, sitting slumped against the wall. His coat was dusted with frost. His hands trembled as he tried to rub warmth back into them. Ava's chest tightened. Ethan, she called, rushing over. He didn't look up right away. When he did, his eyes were glassy, unfocused. Hey, nurse. His voice was ragged, hoarse. Ava crouched beside him. Jesus, Ethan, you're freezing. When did you eat last? Ethan gave a weak shrug. Not sure. Yesterday, maybe the day before. Ava looked around. The city bustled past them, blind and indifferent. People dodged puddles, checked their phones, pulled scarves tighter. No one seemed to see the man crumpled against the bricks. Or the woman kneeling beside him. Ava clenched her jaw. She pulled off one glove and placed her hand on his cheek. He felt cold as marble. She swallowed hard. I can't leave you here. Ethan tried to protest. I'll be fine. It's just a cold snap. Bullshit, Ava snapped. You're half dead. Come with me. Ethan blinked slowly. Where? My apartment. A brief flicker of fear crossed his face. Just one night, Ava added quickly. Ethan's lips twitched. You sure? No, Ava shot back. But I'm doing it anyway. Ethan exhaled a foggy breath. Between two lives, he murmured again. Ava rolled her eyes. Yeah. Philosophize later. Get up. She pulled his arm over her shoulders and hoisted him to his feet. Ethan stumbled, then steadied himself. Together they shuffled out of the alley, snow swirling around them like silent confetti. As they reached the corner, Ava glanced back. The alley looked empty, the shadows swallowing the spot where Ethan had been. Somehow she felt like she was leaving more than just bricks and concrete behind. She was leaving behind the certainty that she could keep her own life separate from his. But a quiet voice in her chest whispered that some lines, once crossed, never fade again. Ethan was supposed to stay just one night. That's what Ava kept telling herself. One night. One act of kindness and then things would go back to normal. But normal seemed to have taken a vacation. The next morning, Ava woke to the smell of burnt toast. She stumbled out of her bedroom, hair a mess, wearing a faded t-shirt and sweatpants. Ethan stood in the kitchen, staring at the toaster like it had betrayed him. Smoke curled from the blackened slices of bread. Ava waved her hand in front of her face. Oh my God. Ethan glanced at her over his shoulder. Good morning. Ava grabbed the toaster's lever and yanked it up. She dropped the charred bread into the trash. I said one night. Ethan blinked innocently. And technically it's morning. Ava opened her mouth, ready to yell. Then she caught the look on his face, cautious, almost apologetic. She sighed. Fine. But don't set the place on fire. Ethan lifted a finger. No promises. Ava rubbed her temples and grabbed instant coffee. Later that day she returned from dropping off resumes and found the apartment different. The books on the shelf were organized by subject. The crooked picture frame above the sofa was straightened. The flickering light in the bathroom was fixed. A faint lemon scent hung in the air. Ethan was on the floor tinkering with the remote control. He looked up. Hey. The power button was stuck. I fixed it. Ava stared at him. You know how to fix electronics? Ethan shrugged. Curiosity. She crossed her arms. Were you an electrician in your past life or something? Ethan smiled faintly. Something like that. Ava narrowed her eyes. Look, I appreciate the help. But you can't just take over my apartment. I'm just keeping busy, Ethan said. And besides, your lamp was driving me crazy. Ava muttered under her breath and disappeared into her bedroom. But that night she lay awake, staring at the ceiling. She kept replaying everything she'd seen. The neat books, the fixed light, the fact that Ethan knew what a capacitor was. No way he was just some drifter. The next morning she found Ethan sitting at the table reading a thick hardcover book. Ava froze in the hallway. Is that macroeconomics for business leaders? Ethan looked up, deadpan. It's actually a terrible read. Ava dropped her bag on the chair. Okay, seriously. Who are you? Ethan Rhodes, he said simply. Ava threw up her hands. Homeless philosopher and electronics expert? Come on. Ethan closed the book. People are complicated. Ava sat down across from him, glaring. You're hiding something. Ethan met her eyes, unblinking. Aren't we all? Ava fell silent. She hated how he always flipped her questions back at her. Still, she let him stay another night. And another. Days blurred together. Ethan kept fixing things. The sink, the squeaky door, a clogged drain. He started folding Ava's laundry. He organized the fridge. He even labeled the spice rack. Ava felt like she was living with a polite hurricane. But he was gentle, careful not to invade her space. Mostly. Until the afternoon Ava came home early. The apartment was quiet. She tiptoed toward her bedroom. Through the cracked door she saw Ethan sitting at her desk. Her laptop was open in front of him. His fingers moved fast over the keyboard. Ava's breath caught in her throat. Ethan. He flinched like he'd been struck. Ava stormed into the room. What the hell are you doing? Ethan lifted his hands from the keyboard. I was just checking your resume. Ava's eyes went wide. My resume? Ethan nodded. It needed formatting. And I added some bullet points. Ava's jaw dropped. You hacked into my files? Ethan frowned. It wasn't hacking. Your laptop was unlocked. That's not the point. Ava yelled. She grabbed the laptop and pulled it toward her. Ethan held up a palm. Before you yell more, just look. Ava stared at him, furious. Then she scrolled through the document. To her shock, it was better. Smoother layout. Stronger wording. Numbers where there'd been vague sentences. Accomplishments highlighted. She closed the laptop with a snap. You had no right. I know, Ethan said quietly. But you deserve a shot. Ava clenched her fists. I don't need you fixing my life. Ethan looked at the floor. Maybe not. But someone should remind you how good you are. Ava swallowed hard. Part of her wanted to scream. Another part wanted to hug him. Instead, she stormed out of the room. She slammed the bathroom door and sat on the edge of the tub, breathing hard. Her reflection in the mirror looked back at her, furious, confused, and somehow, a little hopeful. Because for the first time in a long time, she wondered if maybe her life didn't have to stay the same. She'd just have to figure out who Ethan really was first. Ava Carter sat on the worn plastic chair in the waiting area, staring at the floor tiles like they might suddenly reveal the secrets of the universe. Her palms were sweaty against the new copies of her resume. She could barely believe it. One email had changed everything. A tech startup named Quantum Edge had called her for an interview. She'd read the email 3 times to be sure it wasn't spam. Apparently, someone had sent in her updated resume. The one Ethan had accidentally improved. Ava kept telling herself she should be mad at him. But as she sat there, she realized she was grateful. Because for the first time in months she had hope. The receptionist called her name. Ava wiped her hands on her skirt and stood. Inside the interview room, bright lights hummed overhead. The panel of 3 interviewers seemed pleasant enough. Ava took a deep breath and forced herself to remember Ethan's words. People notice confidence. Even if you have to fake it. So she faked it. And halfway through she realized she wasn't faking anymore. The questions felt natural. Her answers were sharp, precise. She saw one of the interviewers nod approvingly as she explained a project she'd managed at the diner, turning chaos into efficiency. By the end they were all smiling. Thank you, Ava, one said. We'll be in touch very soon. Ava walked out feeling lighter than she had in years. As she stepped back into the crisp winter air, she wanted to scream with relief. She grinned, breath visible in white puffs. And for once, she didn't care that her coat was secondhand or that she was still broke. She felt possible. She decided to treat herself to a cheap hot dog. She crossed the street toward a vendor and stopped at a small newsstand. She hadn't bought a newspaper in ages. No one did anymore. But a headline caught her eye. Old copies were stacked haphazardly in a rack labeled "Clearance, 50 cents." On one cover was a photograph. A man with sharp features, clean-shaven, wearing a perfectly tailored suit. Dark hair, intense eyes, the kind that seemed to see right through you. Ethan. Ava's pulse stuttered. Her brain refused to connect the dots. But there he was, Ethan, staring back at her from the glossy page. Above his photo, bold letters screamed, "Mystery surrounds CO Ethan R. Donovan, presumed dead in helicopter crash." Ava grabbed the newspaper off the rack. Her hands shook as she flipped through the article. It described a brilliant tech CEO, founder of Zephyr Tech, who disappeared 8 months earlier after a helicopter went down in a remote mountain pass. His body was never found. Speculation ran wild: foul play, corporate sabotage, hidden debts. Ava stood frozen on the sidewalk. Cars honked around her, people pushed past. She didn't move. She barely breathed. A part of her wanted to scream at the absurdity of it. Ethan, the man crashing on her couch, burning toast, fixing her faucet, was a billionaire CEO? Everything inside her flipped upside down. She thought of his eyes, how they always seemed to be studying the world. The way he spoke in riddles. The books he read. All the little signs. She realized she'd been ignoring them all along. Ava clutched the paper and turned, running. She didn't wait for the hot dog. She ran all the way home. When she burst into the apartment, Ethan was sitting on the floor, untangling a mess of charging cables. He looked up, smiling. Hey, how'd it go? Ava slammed the newspaper onto the coffee table. Who the hell are you? Ethan blinked, confused. Ava? Don't Ava me, she shouted. She pointed at the paper. This is you. Ethan's eyes dropped to the headline. For a moment, his entire body seemed to go still, as if someone had unplugged him. He swallowed hard. It's complicated. Complicated? Ava barked. You lied to me. Ethan rubbed his forehead. I didn't lie. I just didn't tell you everything. Ava paced in tight circles. So you're Ethan R. Donovan? CEO of Zephyrtech? The guy who supposedly died. Yes. Ethan's voice was barely a whisper. Ava's chest rose and fell quickly. What? Why the hell would you live like this? Sleeping in alleys, pretending to be homeless. Ethan looked away. Because it was safer than staying alive in the world I used to know. Ava stared at him, speechless. Ethan took a slow breath. I didn't plan on disappearing. After the accident, I was stranded. No phone. No ID. And someone inside my own company wanted me gone. Ava froze. Who? Ethan hesitated. Victor Lane. My CEO. He took control after I vanished. And I realized he was planning to sell off the company piece by piece. Destroy everything I'd built. Ava felt like the air had turned solid in her lungs. All this time, you were hiding from your own company? Ethan nodded. And from the media. And from the people who'd use me as leverage. Ava dropped into a chair, shaking. So everything you've been doing, the books, the fixing things, the resume, it's all because you're some billionaire genius? Ethan didn't smile. I'm not a genius. I'm just trying to make things right. Ava clenched her fists. Why didn't you trust me enough to tell me? Because I didn't want you mixed up in it, Ethan said, voice cracking. I didn't want you to get hurt. Ava stared at him, heart pounding. And for a moment she saw the man who'd bandaged her knee, who'd made her coffee, who'd whispered that little things save people. She wanted to scream. She wanted to run. Instead she whispered, I deserve the truth. Ethan finally met her eyes. And you'll have it. All of it. Ava wiped her eyes. You'd better start talking. Ethan nodded, looking suddenly very small on her living room floor. Okay. He began to speak. And the truth spilled out like water from a cracked dam. Silence hung heavy in Ava's apartment as Ethan finally began to speak. His voice was low, like each word carried a burden. Victor Lane, he said. Ava sat frozen, her fingers gripping the edge of the coffee table. Victor was my chief operating officer, Ethan continued. He was there from the beginning of Zephyrtech. My right hand. My friend. Ava searched his face, finding shadows there she hadn't seen before. And now, Ethan let out a harsh breath. Now he's trying to rip everything apart. Ava blinked rapidly. Rip what apart? Why would he do that? Ethan stared at his hands. Because Zephyrtech is worth billions. And Victor, he's tired of being number 2. Ava leaned closer. Okay, how is he pulling this off? Ethan lowered his voice even further. He's creating shell companies. Fake corporations that look legitimate. He's transferring assets, patents, proprietary tech, confidential projects, bit by bit into those shells. Ava's jaw dropped. So he's hollowing out Zephyrtech and selling it piece by piece? Ethan nodded grimly. Exactly. And the worst part is, he's using my name to do it. Old contracts I signed before the accident. People think I'm dead. No one's questioning the signatures. Ava shivered despite the heat in the room. So, he's pretending you're still running things? Not exactly, Ethan said. He's pretending I approved everything. And since I'm not around to deny it, the board believes him. Ava pressed her palms over her eyes for a moment. This is insane. Ethan's shoulders slumped. I didn't want you involved. I thought, maybe if I stayed gone, Zephyr Tech would survive without me. Ava looked at him like he'd lost his mind. That's crap, Ethan. That company is your whole damn life. Ethan let out a dry laugh. It used to be. No. I'm not sure. Ava smacked the coffee table. So what's the plan? You're just gonna stay hiding out forever? Ethan shook his head. I've been tracking Victor's movements, watching patterns. But it's not enough. I can't get into the internal financial systems anymore. Ava crossed her arms. You? The big tech CEO? Can't hack your own company? Ethan frowned slightly. Hacking Zephyr Tech would leave a digital footprint a mile wide. Victor's probably monitoring for any unauthorized access. If I try to break in, he'll know immediately. Ava squeezed her eyes shut, trying to process it all. Ethan looked at her with a vulnerability that twisted her gut. I know it's asking a lot, but I need help. Ava raised an eyebrow. From me? Ethan nodded slowly. You're invisible to Victor. You're not in any of his reports. You're smart, quick, and he'll never see you coming. Ava barked out a short, humorless laugh. I'm a broke ex-waitress, Ethan. Ethan leaned forward, earnest. You're the woman who held your own against that street vendor. The woman who took me in when I was bleeding. And the woman who learned how to bandage wounds without blinking. Ava swallowed hard. That's not exactly spy training. Ethan cracked a half-smile. Neither of us are spies. But right now we're all I've got. Ava stared at him, feeling like she was standing on a cliff's edge. Images flashed in her head. Victor's face she'd never even seen. Lines of computer code she'd never read. Millions of dollars funneling into shadows. And Ethan, standing there looking half broken and half unstoppable. One part of her screamed, run. The other part whispered, stay. She thought about the way Ethan fixed her resume. How he'd sat on the kitchen floor fixing her toaster. How he'd looked at her like she mattered. Ava drew in a shaky breath. What exactly do you want me to do? Ethan hesitated. There's a company called Solutions. Victor's using them to move data offshore. If we can get into their network, we can trace where the money's going. Ava's eyes widened. Ethan. That's illegal. Ethan didn't flinch. So is what Victor's doing. Ava pressed her fingers to her temples. I can't believe I'm considering this. Ethan's voice softened. I'm not asking you to break laws for me. I'm asking you to help protect the people who work for Zephyr Tech. The engineers. The researchers. The families counting on those paychecks. Ava blinked back tears she didn't even realize were there. You want me to be your undercover mole? Ethan nodded. Yes, but only if you choose it. I won't force you. Ava stared into his eyes, searching for lies. She found none. A strange strength filled her chest, even as fear curled around her ribs. She thought of all the times she'd felt powerless. Of how, for the first time in ages, she felt like her life meant something more. Slowly, Ava nodded. Okay, I'll do it. Ethan let out a breath, relief flooding his features. Thank you. But, Ava said firmly, holding up a finger, there's one condition. Ethan tilted his head. Name it. Ava jabbed her finger at his chest. No. More. Secrets. Ethan hesitated, then nodded solemnly. No more secrets. Ava wasn't sure if she believed him. But as she sat across from the man the world thought was dead, she knew there was no going back. She was in this now. All the way in. Ava Carter sat in a tiny interview room at Solutions, hands folded tight in her lap. A corporate logo flickered on the flat screen behind the HR manager's head. It felt surreal. 1 week ago, she'd been dodging eviction. Now, she was interviewing for a data entry position that could decide the future of a billion-dollar company. The HR manager smiled politely. Tell me, Ava, why do you want to work here? Ava swallowed hard. She thought of Ethan's eyes that night, full of desperation. She thought of the engineers he wanted to protect. She forced herself to smile. I'm detail-oriented. I like working behind the scenes. The HR woman tilted her head, scribbling notes. Well, your resume looks solid. We can start you as a temp for 3 weeks. Ava tried not to sag in relief. Thank you. That's perfect. She signed the papers with shaking hands. Outside, she called Ethan from a quiet corner of the parking garage. It's done, she whispered. Ethan's voice crackled through her cheap phone. I knew you could do it. Ava pressed her forehead against the concrete wall. I'm scared out of my mind, Ethan. So am I, he said softly. But you're not alone. That night, Ava lay awake staring at the ceiling. The reality of what she was about to do kept pounding in her chest. Could she really steal secrets? Was she becoming just like Victor? She thought of Zephyrtech's employees, families, mortgages, dreams. She clenched her fists under the blanket. She had to try. The next morning, Ava stepped into Solara Solutions as an official employee. The lobby gleamed like a spaceship. Glass walls. Polished chrome fixtures. Security cameras everywhere. A woman named Kelly trained her on accessing client databases. Ava forced herself to nod and smile, absorbing every detail. She kept her movements small, quiet, invisible. At lunch, she sat alone in the cafeteria, pretending to scroll her phone. Ethan texted her. Check emails for routing folders. Look for anything labeled ZT or Raptor Holdings. Don't touch anything else. Stay safe. Ava's pulse raced. Later that day, she found a shared drive marked Archives. She clicked it open, heart pounding. Rows of folders appeared. Most looked harmless. Contracts, expense reports, travel logs. But one folder was labeled ZT Invoices. Ava clicked it, fingers trembling. Inside were invoices signed E.R. Donovan. Millions of dollars routed to companies Ava had never heard of. Her stomach flipped. Victor was funneling money through shell companies under Ethan's name. She glanced over her shoulder. Nobody was watching. Quickly, she copied the files onto a hidden USB drive she kept under her blouse. That night, Ava met Ethan in a dark corner booth of a 24-hour diner. He wore a baseball cap low over his eyes. Ava slid into the seat across from him. I got it. Ethan's eyes snapped up. What did you find? Ava shoved the USB across the table. Invoices. Fake payments. All signed by you. Victor's moving the money offshore. Ethan's shoulders dropped. Shit. Ava lowered her voice. He's deeper into this than you thought. Ethan stared at the flickering neon lights outside the window. How many people know about this? Ava clenched her teeth. No one. Yet. But if Victor realizes I'm digging? Ethan grabbed her hand across the table. I'm not going to let him hurt you. Ava pulled her hand back gently. Ethan, we have to be smart. Not heroic. His jaw tightened. I hate that you're in danger because of me. Ava held his gaze. I chose this. Remember that. They sat in silence as the waitress dropped off coffee refills. Steam curled between them like ghosts. Back at Solara, Ava continued her routine. She went to work every day pretending to be invisible. She wore neutral colors. Spoke only when spoken to. But inside she was a live wire. Every beep of a security door made her jump. One afternoon, Kelly stopped by her cubicle. Hey Ava, you've been quiet lately. Everything okay? Ava forced a smile. Just adjusting. New job jitters. Kelly smiled back. Hang in there. The moment Kelly walked away, Ava let out a shaky breath. Later, she planted a tiny voice recorder in a conference room where Victor was rumored to meet with Solara execs. The next day she slipped in and retrieved it. That night, she listened to the audio on her laptop with headphones. Victor's voice was unmistakable. Keep moving the money. No one's looking for Donovan anymore. Ava's chest constricted. Victor sounded so casual. So certain he'd won. She emailed Ethan a snippet of the audio. He replied instantly. This is the proof. We're almost there. But even as they closed in on Victor, things between Ava and Ethan began to shift. Ava found herself questioning everything he said. She caught him checking anonymous emails, then closing the screen when she entered the room. She snapped at him for leaving the TV on news channels covering Zephyrtech. He snapped back, saying he needed to know the latest. Some nights they barely spoke. Others they clung to each other like lifelines. Ava wondered if she could ever fully trust him. or if this entire thing would swallow them both whole. But every time she thought about quitting, she remembered Victor's voice. No one's looking for Donovan anymore. And she knew she couldn't walk away. Not now. The Magnolia Hotel was all polished marble and hushed voices. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead like 1,000 tiny stars. Ava Carter stood by the back wall of the grand ballroom, wearing a black blazer and an earpiece. Her heart pounded so hard she thought it might explode out of her chest. She could smell the expensive cologne and hear the low buzz of wealthy investors murmuring to each other. All around her, servers glided by carrying silver trays of champagne. But Ava couldn't taste anything except fear. Ethan was somewhere in this crowd. She couldn't see him yet. He'd insisted they stay apart until the last moment. Victor Lane stood at the front of the ballroom, holding the microphone. He looked sleek, confident, wearing a perfectly tailored suit. A giant screen behind him displayed the Zephyrtech logo. "Ladies and gentlemen," Victor said, voice smooth as silk, "we stand on the brink of a revolutionary merger. Zephyrtech's assets, paired with Raptor Holdings' global reach, will reshape the tech landscape forever." Applause rippled through the crowd. Ava felt bile rise in her throat. She forced herself to smile and blend in as just another event staffer. Victor kept speaking, his tone oozing charisma. He flashed pie charts and graphs. Projected profit numbers so high they looked fake. Ava's earpiece crackled. Ethan's voice came through, low and urgent. "I'm coming in. Get ready." Ava's breath caught. She scanned the crowd. And then she saw him. Ethan slipped through a side door, wearing a sharp gray suit and wire-rimmed glasses. His hair was neatly combed, beard trimmed. He looked every bit the powerful tech investor he was pretending to be. Ava's eyes widened. She barely recognized him. Ethan walked calmly toward the front as if he belonged there. Victor noticed him approaching and faltered for half a second. But he quickly recovered, smiling wider. Are there any questions before we move on?" Ethan raised his hand. "Actually, yes." Victor nodded politely. "Of course. Please introduce yourself." Ethan removed his glasses and pocketed them. "My name is Ethan Rhodes." A hush fell over the room. Victor's smile froze on his face. A ripple of confusion swept through the audience. Victor laughed, though his eyes were sharp. "Well, Mr. Rhodes, I'm not familiar with you." Ethan tilted his head. "That's strange, considering you've been forging my signature for the past 8 months." Gasps erupted. Whispers buzzed like hornets. Victor lifted his hands, palms out. "Sir, I think you're mistaken." Ethan stepped closer. "You know me by another name. Ethan R. Donovan." Silence slammed into the room. Every head turned toward Ethan. Victor's face turned pale. "That's impossible," Victor stammered. "Ethan Donovan is dead." Ethan's voice was razor sharp. "No, I'm very much alive. And you've been using my name to gut my company and steal millions." Victor tried to speak, but Ethan cut him off. "Ladies and gentlemen," Ethan said, addressing the entire ballroom, "please turn your attention to the screens." He raised a small remote and clicked a button. The giant projector behind Victor flickered. Slides disappeared. Suddenly, the screen displayed transaction records. Fake invoices. Audio snippets of Victor saying, "No one's looking for Donovan anymore." The room erupted into chaos. People shouted, demanding explanations. Some began filming on their phones. Victor lunged toward Ethan, grabbing his arm. "Shut it down," Victor hissed. Ethan yanked free. "It's over, Victor." Security guards rushed forward, trying to separate them. Victor turned to the crowd, his voice trembling. "Everyone, this is a lie. He's an imposter." Ethan faced the room. "I am Ethan Donovan. I have proof of my identity and of Victor's crimes." Police officers appeared at the ballroom doors, flashing badges. A female officer stepped forward, reading from a warrant. "Victor Lane, you are under arrest for fraud and conspiracy." Victor's face crumpled. No, this is a mistake." Officers grabbed his arms and twisted them behind his back. Flashbulbs popped as journalists pushed closer. Victor screamed as he was dragged from the ballroom. A hush fell over the crowd. All eyes turned to Ethan. He stood breathing hard, shoulders shaking. Ava slipped closer, heart still hammering. Ethan caught her gaze. Tears shimmered in his eyes. "Thank you," he whispered. Ava didn't know whether to hug him or punch him. Instead, she reached for his hand. For one electric moment, they stood together as the chaos raged around them. Ethan squeezed her fingers. Then he lifted his chin and faced the cameras. "My name is Ethan R. Donovan," he announced. "And I'm taking my company back." Reporters camped outside Zephyrtech's glass headquarters like wolves scenting blood. Every time the automatic doors whooshed open, camera flashes went off. Ava Carter stood behind Ethan as they pushed through the lobby, the marble floors echoing under their steps. Ethan wore a navy suit, freshly shaved, but his eyes held exhaustion. The moment they stepped outside, microphones thrust into his face. "Mr. Donovan, why were you in hiding for 8 months? Is Victor Lane working alone or with others? Are you coming back as CEO?" Ethan raised his hands. "One question at a time, please." He cleared his throat. "I've been gone, but I'm not gone anymore. My priority is saving Zephyrtech and protecting our people." Investors watched every word on live news feeds. Some hailed Ethan as a hero who'd survived betrayal. Others whispered doubts about a man who'd vanished, then reappeared out of nowhere. In boardrooms, debates raged. Ethan sat through meetings that stretched past midnight. He spoke quietly but firmly, demanding full audits of all financials. He called for transparency in every department. He insisted every employee should know the truth about Victor's schemes. Some board members pushed back. "Ethan, the press is eating this alive. If we admit internal chaos, the stock will tank." Ethan pressed his palms flat on the table. "I'd rather the truth tank our stock than let Victor's lies destroy us later." Silence fell around the conference room. Ava watched him, pride and fear twisting together inside her chest. Each day at Zephyrtech felt like navigating a minefield. Rumors flew around the office. Some employees stared at Ethan in awe. Others whispered about conspiracies. Ethan walked the corridors with his head high. He stopped to talk to engineers in hoodies and accountants in suits. He listened. He asked questions. Ava followed him everywhere, carrying binders and fielding angry phone calls from investors. One afternoon she found Ethan alone in his office. He stood at the window staring out at the city skyline. Papers were scattered across his desk. "Ethan," she said softly. He didn't turn. "Victor was my friend." Ava stepped closer. "I know." Ethan's shoulders sagged. "He's the one who helped me start this company. And he's the one who nearly destroyed it." Ava swallowed. "I guess sometimes the people closest to us can hurt us worst." Ethan turned finally, eyes red-rimmed. "Every signature on those documents was mine. People trusted me. And now, they look at me like I'm a ghost." Ava reached out and took his hand. "You're not a ghost. You're the reason this company still exists." Ethan's voice broke. "And you're the reason I'm still standing." Ava squeezed his hand gently. "Then let's keep standing." A few days later, Ethan stood in the cafeteria addressing the entire staff. Cameras filmed every word. A hush fell as he cleared his throat. "I know many of you have questions about where I've been. And why I disappeared." He paused, scanning the crowd. "I can't change the past. But I promise you this, I will do everything in my power to rebuild your trust." People clapped cautiously. Some eyes were tearful. Others were skeptical. But a ripple of hope moved through the room. Afterward, Ava helped answer employees' questions in smaller groups. She explained the audits. She reassured them their jobs were safe. But at night, doubts gnawed at her. Victor might be in jail, but legal threats lingered. Investors were still nervous. Some lawyers whispered that Ethan's reappearance could trigger shareholder lawsuits. In moments of exhaustion, Ava found herself snapping at Ethan. "Why didn't you tell me everything sooner?" Ethan snapped back. "Because I was trying to protect you." One night, they argued so loudly in Ethan's office that an assistant outside pretended not to hear. Then they both fell silent. Ethan dropped into a chair, burying his face in his hands. Ava stared at him, feeling anger and love collide inside her chest. She wanted to shake him. She wanted to kiss him. Instead, she whispered, I don't want to be your secret anymore. Ethan lifted his head. You're not. Not ever again. Ava searched his eyes looking for lies. She didn't see any. Slowly she nodded. Then let's finish this. And so, day after day they worked side by side. Digging through spreadsheets. Talking to lawyers. Calling old investors. Zephyr Tech slowly began to stabilize. But a storm still brewed on the horizon. And Ava knew the fight wasn't over yet. The envelope was thin and white, but it felt heavier than iron in Ethan's hands. Ava found him standing frozen in the mailroom, staring at it. Ethan? What is it? She asked. He tore it open slowly, eyes scanning the words. His face went pale. It's Victor's lawyers. They're pressing charges. Ava blinked. Pressing charges for what? He's in prison. Ethan swallowed. They're accusing me of fraud. And identity deception. Ava's mouth fell open. They're saying you pretended to be someone else? To scam your own company? They're claiming Ethan Rhodes was a fake identity. That I used it to manipulate the board. To commit fraud. Ava felt a wave of fury rise up. That's insane. Ethan slumped against the wall. I vanished. I changed my name. I hid. It's not hard for them to spin it. Ava snatched the letter from his hand. We're going to fight this. You hear me? 6 weeks later, the courthouse steps were swarmed by reporters again. Ava and Ethan pushed through flashes and questions. Mr. Donovan, did you fake your disappearance? Miss Carter, are you involved in the fraud? Ava didn't answer. She just gripped Ethan's hand. Inside the courtroom, the prosecution called Ethan a master manipulator. A man who staged his own death. A man who stole millions while pretending to be homeless. They showed videos of Ethan at the Magnolia Hotel. Photos of him living in back alleys. A prosecutor stalked across the floor. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this man is a chameleon. He changes faces to suit his needs. He cannot be trusted. Ethan sat stone-faced beside his lawyers. Ava watched his jaw clench tighter with every word. When the defense lawyer rose, he called Ava to the witness stand. Ava took the oath, her palms sweating against the wooden railing. The defense lawyer stepped closer. Miss Carter, how did you first meet Mr. Donovan? Ava took a shaky breath. He helped me when I fell. I thought he was homeless. But even then he was kind, smart, and scared. The prosecutor shot to his feet. Objection. Irrelevant. The judge waved a hand. Overruled. Continue. The defense continued. Did Ethan ever try to defraud you? Ava blinked back tears. No. He hid who he was, yes. Because he was afraid. But he didn't steal. He didn't lie to gain money. He wanted to protect his company. The prosecutor cut in. So you admit he lied to you? Ava glared at him. He lied about who he was. But not about why. He was trying to survive. The prosecutor slammed a file down. And isn't it true he signed documents under 2 names? Yes, Ava snapped. Because one name was safer than the other. Because he was running for his life. Murmurs swept the courtroom. The judge banged the gavel. Order. Ava's voice wavered as she looked at the jury. Ethan is not a criminal. He's a man who was betrayed. Who tried to save his company. And the people working for him. The defense rested. The jury deliberated for 2 days. Ava and Ethan waited in a hallway that smelled of coffee and floor polish. Ethan paced silent. Ava stared at the ceiling, repeating silent prayers. On the 3rd day the jury returned. The 4-person stood. In the case of fraud and identity deception, we find the defendant, Ethan Donovan, not guilty. A sob tore from Ava's throat. Ethan doubled over, elbows on his knees, shaking. Journalists shouted questions. Ethan ignored them all. Outside the courthouse he turned to Ava. It's over. But Ava shook her head. Not completely. 2 days later, Ethan stood in the boardroom of Zephyr Tech. The directors sat in stiff rows, eyes tired. The chairman spoke first. Ethan, the jury cleared you. But the media storm isn't over. The investors are worried. They're demanding reassurance. Ethan nodded slowly. I understand. Another director leaned forward. Your name alone is enough to make headlines. We're grateful for what you did. But Tech might not survive more scandals. Ethan lowered his eyes. I know. Ava slammed her hand on the table. This is ridiculous. He saved this company. The chairman sighed. This isn't about fairness. It's about stability. Ethan raised a hand to silence her. No, Ava. They're right. He looked at the board. I'll step down. Effective immediately. Ava stared at him like he'd slapped her. Ethan, don't you dare. It's the only way Tech can move on. One by one, the board members nodded grimly. Later, outside the boardroom, Ava grabbed Ethan's arm. This isn't fair. Ethan let out a weary laugh. Fair doesn't exist, Ava? She blinked away tears. So, what now? Ethan shrugged. I guess. I figure out who I am without being CO. Ava laid a hand on his chest. Whoever you are, that's who I want. For a moment Ethan said nothing. Then he pulled her into a fierce hug. And neither of them said another word. Because the truth had cost everything. But in each other they still had something left. Ava Carter woke up one rainy morning to find Ethan gone. No text. No call. Just a single envelope propped against her coffee mug on the kitchen table. Her hands shook as she opened it. Inside was a letter, written in Ethan's neat, precise handwriting. Ava, I love you. But I can't stay, not yet. I need time to fix the pieces of myself still broken. To close doors I left open. I promise this isn't goodbye. Please, wait for me. Ethan. Ava sank into a chair, the letter trembling in her grip. She wanted to scream. She wanted to throw something. Instead, she folded the letter carefully and put it in her pocket. And went to work. Days turned into weeks. Tech moved on without Ethan. Ava tried to do the same. She rented a small space on Maple Street in Riverton. The shop had peeling paint and squeaky floors, but the sun streamed through the front windows every morning. Ava called it Second Chances Books. She stacked shelves with battered novels, old poetry collections, cookbooks missing dust jackets. People came in for coffee and stayed to talk about everything except tech scandals and trials. Ava liked it that way. At night, she sometimes stared at the empty side of her bed. She kept Ethan's letter in the drawer beside her. Just touching the paper made her chest ache. But slowly the ache turned softer. One morning, 6 months after the trial, a letter arrived at the bookstore. No return address. Just her name in Ethan's handwriting. Ava ripped it open, heart hammering. Meet me at Whispering Pines Cafe. Tomorrow. Noon. E. Ava didn't sleep that night. She paced the tiny shop. She counted inventory 3 times. She told herself not to hope. And hoped anyway. The next day the sky was bright and clear. Birds chattered in the trees lining the highway as she drove out of town. Whispering Pines Cafe sat on a quiet country road, its sign faded by sun and rain. Ava parked her car and took a shaky breath. She pushed open the door, a little bell jingling overhead. And there he was. Ethan sat at a corner table, wearing a simple dark sweater and jeans. No suit. No tie. No CEO armor. Just Ethan. He stood up as soon as he saw her. His eyes were tired but clear. Ava. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. He stepped closer. I'm sorry I left. Ava folded her arms across her chest. You should be. Ethan let out a small, pained laugh. I know. He looked around the cafe. 6 months ago, I wasn't ready to be with you. Not really. I was still carrying too much shame. Anger. I didn't even know who I was without the company. Ava swallowed hard. And now? Ethan exhaled. Now. I'm just me. I'm not a CEO. Not anyone's boss. Just a man who loves you. And who wants to build something real. Ava blinked back tears. You hurt me, Ethan. I know. His voice cracked. And I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you. Ava looked him up and down. No secrets this time? No secrets, Ethan promised. A long silence stretched between them. Then Ethan reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small, battered paperback. It was a copy of The Great Gatsby, dog-eared and faded. I bought this at your bookstore, he said. Your name was written on the inside cover. It felt like a sign. Ava laughed through tears. You're ridiculous. I know. Ethan took her hands. So, would you consider giving this ridiculous man one more chance? Ava took a deep breath. I don't want a CO. I know. I just want Ethan. The man who burns toast. Who fixes my faucet. Who believes in me even when I don't believe in myself. Ethan nodded, his eyes shining. Then that's all I'll ever be. Ava wiped her cheeks. Okay. One more chance. Ethan let out a long, shaky breath. Thank God. Ava punched his arm lightly. And don't ever disappear on me again. I won't, Ethan said. He grinned. I promise. No more secrets. No more running. Ava slid into the chair across from him. Outside the cafe, sunlight spilled through the pines. Birds sang and the world kept turning. And for the first time in a long time, Ava felt like maybe, just maybe, she was exactly where she was meant to be. Not every love begins with fairy tales or flawless timing. Some stories start in alleyways with spilled lunches, secret names, and scars no one else sees. Some love isn't built in ballrooms, but in late-night conversations, courtroom battles, and the quiet promise to stay. If Ethan and Ava's story touched you, leave a comment and tell us how. If you believe love is less about perfection and more about choosing each other every day, hit like and share it with someone who needs hope. And don't forget to subscribe to SoulTales, where every story isn't just told, it's felt.